Hello, hello, hello. My name is Lee Kara. This is a version of Unleash Your Light. I'm so grateful that you are here. I told you guys yesterday that I was going to share a story about bears. Now, this is not your typical story about bears, and I cannot take any credit for this story. I did see it in a TikTok video and then did my own research, and it is fascinating. I'm going to tell you the moral of this story at the end. But I'm going to tie this very real world, practical / political story in to spirituality, as I always do, and self-reflection, okay? So, once upon a time, there was a town in New Hampshire called Grafton. And Grafton was the site of it was a very small town, and it was kind of like the site of a takeover. I don't want to call it a takeover, but a lot of libertarians were already living there and moved there to try to create like a free state. If you don't know what libertarians are, they're basically people whose political party is summed up with "I do what I want." They tend to stick very with the original words of the Constitution, and they don't like to be regulated. They think that we shouldn't have like crosswalk rules. Maybe I'm simplifying it, but basically it's "I do what I want, and you don't tell me what to do, and I won't tell you what to do, and we shouldn't fund things, that keep everybody, like the lights and the road and all this kind of stuff. We should just do the bare minimum, and everybody does their part on their own or not, because I do what I want." Okay. So in this town of just over 1,000 people, the libertarians came in, they jumped into government, and they started cutting things and changing rules, and they basically took away almost every law that there was in the town. So a little time goes by, and they start to notice, as they look around their little town, there's a lot more bears here than there used to be. Like a weirdly greater amount of bears. This is very strange. So they start to notice all these bears, and they can't quite figure out why there's so many bears there. But then they realize it's because there's no law anymore against feeding the bears. Now, these are not cute little teddy bears. These are not the kind of bears that you want to snuggle up with at night, These are outside, will kill you if they can, rip you to shreds, run as fast as you can, or stand very still and hope they don't see you, like T-Rexes kind of bears. So because there's no more rules about not feeding the bears, people are feeding them entire boxes of donuts and putting food out for them in their yards and, encourage just doing whatever they want to. So now some people say, "This is too many bears for our town. We can't have that many bears. Why are you feeding the bears?" And the response is, "I do what I want. I do what I want. If I want to feed the bears, I will. There's no law against it." So the people that don't want bears there, they start hunting the bears, kind of like out in the open. And then you have people that are feeding the bears, like out in the open. And you have people in the middle who aren't doing anything. They're not even involved. They're just being affected by all the bears. I read a little story, this is in a book. I read a little story from the book about a woman who was playing with her kittens in the front yard, and a bear came up and snatched 2 of them and gobbled them down in front of her and then ran back into the woods. So, needless to say, these bears are affecting everything in town. So finally somebody from the town calls in the Game and Wildlife Commission for the state, who tells them, "Well, we can't do anything about it. We would suggest not feeding the bears, but you have, said that's okay. And it's illegal for you to hunt them statewide, though, without a special license, so you might want to stop that, because if we see you, we're going to arrest you or have you taken out by a different set of cops than you have here in your little libertarian town." So that takes people to the next level, where they have created secret bear hunting posses that meet under the cover of darkness, dressed in black, and they go out at night and they secretly hunt down the bears, while people are still feeding them McDonald's and, Dunkin' Donuts and things like that. And the bears are running wild, and there's potholes in the street, and the lights aren't working very well, and people are really starting to not be happy with their libertarian government. Now, I tell you that story to bring in a concept that I believe a lot of people, especially in the spiritual world, present to the rest of us. I always talk about spirituality in regular life, what we can do in our everyday life to try to access that, right? I talk about my personal struggles. I talk about my personal self-reflection. I speak about things that the universe says to me, hey, tell them this and see what they think. Tell them this and have them relate it to their own experiences so that they can then kind of see where they stand in it, so that someone else can recognize it from a different perspective. Because I tend to think I look at things very differently from other people. Evidently, I don't think that I'm that different, but other people tell me, you are very different. You are a little bit weird, but that's okay. So there are some things like this libertarianism that are good in theory, good on paper. They make sense in like that written form. Freedom, like real freedom to do whatever I want to with no rules and nothing else, nothing constraining me. There are some things on paper that look really good, but in practice are not so great. And they found that out in this little town. In our society, as my 17-year-old son told me, in our society, we sign on to a social contract which allows the people who are in charge, the authorities, whatever, it allows us to all agree to a certain type of behavior so that we can keep everyone safe. And so one of those laws in that particular town would have been, don't feed the bears. And while that seems like a restriction on a personal freedom, it also allows you to protect all the people around you just by giving up a little piece of your own personal freedom. This is the difference between a community and the type of individual freedom that libertarianism goes for, that Ayn Rand, originalist, creationist, I can't remember the name of the people that she follows, that she leads in that way. This idea that my sovereignty, my personal freedom is more important than the freedom of everyone around me. That what I want to do is more important than what everyone else wants to do. That's what this concept of this libertarianism, this Ayn Rand type of a world is. Whereas if we look to our spiritual practices, if we look to our spiritual teachings, what they teach us is that we are one. That we are one. That I am my brother's keeper. And that they would say the same thing about me. That what I do, everything I do, ripples out into my community. And everything that others in my community do ripple out onto me. So if there was a social contract on the path of spirituality, it would be empathy. It would be kindness. It would be recognizing that what we choose, what we do, what we say, how we act, how we move through this space affects everyone around us, even when we don't see it that way, even when we feel a little bit trod upon by doing it. So now there's a balance in that, because you don't want to give up all of your personal freedoms. But if you can give up something so someone else is not hurt, then that's a good thing. Then that helps the community. That helps the collective, right? Because it may make me feel good to get pissed off. But if I express it and others are hurt, I have now injured the collective, right? I've expressed that anger in a way that made me feel better for the moment, but hurt the collective. or hurt our family or hurt our friend group or whatever it is. This idea of individualism my neurological thing is kicking in, juxtaposed against the good of the whole, is a pull, like a tug of war that we have in our governments. So for example, communism is basically supposed to be everyone works for the common good. All the work goes into a pool. Everything we earn, everything we do goes into a pool, and everybody shares equally. It's like working in a restaurant and having a tip pool. We all know some people don't pull their weight, but the rest of us do what we have to do so that we can all share in the fruits of that labor. I'm not a real big fan of that at working in a restaurant personally, but I get the concept. And in a community, that would be great because you could lift up those who may be not able to help themselves as much. And it doesn't allow for some people to be superior or to have more or there won't be the haves and the have-nots, right? But government gets involved, corrupt people get involved, and things go sideways. Socialism is like a skewed version of that, where we're all putting in a good portion of what we make into the big pot. We are giving away some of what we worked for the good of everyone. So everyone can have health care, and everyone can have nice roads, and everyone can have sick pay, and everyone can have time off when they're pregnant and time off after the baby. There are some socialized states that give 2 years after a woman has a baby, okay? So they're giving a chunk of what they make so that everyone can have it better. So everyone can live in a space that's better than that. And if we go on the other end, where we're in that space of libertarianism and the Ayn Rand people who think unfettered capitalism and complete freedom to do whatever you want to, that takes us into a space where I am the most important thing. I am the only one that matters. And anything that I have to do for me to survive and for me to thrive, I will do. And I don't care if that means that you do not. And so that thought process of my needs are more important than everyone else's impedes on the spiritual journey. And yet we are the center of the spiritual journey that we are on. So our needs are more important than everyone else's. But the way that we express those needs, the way that we explore those needs, the way that we get those needs affects the entire collective. And the way that we do that, the way that we move through that, affects our own evolution, affects how we shift, affects how we transform, affects what comes into our life. So if the way that you get something is to push someone else down, or to use them, or to shun them, or to shame them, so that you can get the right feeling, or the right thing, or the right item, that will affect your progress through this evolution, even though I'm doing what's right for me, right? Because in my way of thinking, pushing someone down is the way to get what they have. Then I take it from them. Now I am satisfied. We can't claim, though, that we're on a spiritual journey and do that. Or at the very least, we can't claim superiority on our spiritual journey and do that. And of course, everyone makes mistakes, and everybody makes their own choices as we go through this. And I don't judge anyone where they are on their journey. Everyone has their own personal crap that they're constantly processing. But if we can recognize our space in the collective along with our personal sovereignty, if we can recognize how our actions, our self-care or selfishness, which is not selfishness, our self-care affects the collective, then we can start to shift how we do everything. Then we can start to shift how we move through this world. It's nice to say, I do what I want. It's nice to think that what we do doesn't have any effect on anyone else. And if we just go through life not paying attention to how it does, we might be getting a lot of things, but we're also probably gathering a lot of karma that we don't want to explore, or possibly hurting people that we don't mean to hurt. Some things look good on paper or feel good in the moment, but don't necessarily promote our growth, don't necessarily promote our soul's evolution, and they don't necessarily extend and expand our access to that divine that's already within us. Every time we choose empathy, we open that door more. Every time we choose kindness, we open the door more. Every time we choose forgiveness, we open the door more. Every time we choose unconditional love, every time we choose something that helps the collective and helps us, we are opening our access to that divine light within us. We are unleashing our light every time that we choose unconditional love over, I do what I want. I'm so grateful for all of you to be here. I have some very exciting things coming up in the weeks to come. Actually, in the new year. It won't be in the weeks to come. It'll be in the new year, 2021. And I hope that you will all be there on this journey with me. If you have not gotten a copy of my first book, Unleash Your Light, Access the Divine Within, it is simple things you can do in your everyday life to embrace and access that unconditional love within you. Really simple stuff. Not easy, but it's very simple. You can get a copy for $2.99. It is very low priced. And I have a YouTube channel, obviously, that has tons of videos on it on almost every topic, every problem you're going to come across. I always speak from a place of the earth experience. I always speak from an accessible place for everyone. There's no woo-woo fluffy states of consciousness, meditate for 10 hours, no complicated stuff, no fluff, just filler. Although I have no filler. Okay, you guys, I'm super grateful you were here. I want you to all remember, you are beloved, you matter, and you are so very loved.